All right, y'all. Unfortunately, back for another review. Today, we're going to be reviewing The Son of the Mask. This is a 2005 film that's a sequel to the Jim Carrey classic, the 1994 The Mask. And it's a really just strange movie. And it was such a trip to watch this movie again because I'm not afraid to admit it. I really liked this movie as a kid. Like, I thought this was a great movie as a kid. And it's kind of strange when I rewatched it as an adult. God damn, man. It definitely did not hold up as well as I thought it was going to be. Now, I will say that despite the huge negative criticism, I mean, this is one of the most infamous sequels of all time. Like, a film that not only bombed when it came out, it killed The Mask as a franchise, potentially. And it's also arguably the reason why certain actors' careers have ended, even though I do feel like that's also kind of exaggerated as well. It definitely, for the director of this, it definitely killed his career. But that being said, Son of the Mask, let's get into this. I'm going to give you my pros, cons, my overall opinions on this thing, maybe a little bit of background, and yeah, my thoughts on the Son of the Mask. Now, to quickly give you my thoughts before I go deeper into the pros and cons, yeah, this movie is not that good. Its reputation absolutely is deserving. It's really not a good sequel. It's not funny. There's some really bad moments in it. It's just a shadow of its former, the predecessor in every level. Now, I do think some of the criticisms of this movie I think are wrong, which I'll get into more when I talk about this movie. Like, I've heard a lot of weird criticisms like, oh, this movie failed because it didn't have Jim Carrey in it. It didn't have the zany Stanley Ipkiss come back. And I think that's wrong. I think, especially if you look at the Mask comic books, which the whole thing with those comics is that every time the mask gets, thrown or gets transported somewhere else and we get a new wearer of the mask with a completely different personality and ideals and such. And that's still a really good series of comic books. So the idea of doing a new mask, a new wearer, that's cool. I think that was a great idea. I don't think Jim Carrey, like I said before in my canceled video, he wanted to come back and do this. I think it was a good approach to do someone new. The shame is they did it horribly. So let's get into this before I go deeper into more rants and stuff. Pros. I will say this, starting out with the pros of this movie. Some of the, visuals of this movie look really good. I am not afraid to admit, despite, and I'll get into this later, some of the really bad CGI, I think everything else looks good in this movie, visually. I think it is mostly directed well. The shots are lined up nicely. They're dynamic. I like the cinematography. I also like a lot of the set design. It's kind of got this kind of vibe from the first movie, but the first movie had this more gritty, 1940s vibe. This movie has that strange 2000s quality, and it's another movie like, for example, if y'all don't remember this movie that also came out around the same time, the live-action Garfield movie, the first one. There's these really colorful houses, and the whole world kind of looks animated, and I kind of like that. It looks strange. It's obviously not based on reality, but I like it. It's cool. It's animated. I would have probably preferred an approach similar to, the first movie, but then again, this movie takes place entirely in a different city. I believe it's called Friend City. It's not Ed City, so it's probably not as crime-ridden, and that's pretty cool. I like Ted's house. It looks ridiculous. Some of the rooms and the design choices look super strange. I mean, super Ted Avery strange, but, it kind of looks cool. I don't know. Maybe I'm just the only one in the crowd that's going to say this, but I kind of like some of the design there. There's also some wacky sequences with the baby and the dog. That whole dynamic I didn't mind. Now, there are some, frankly, unheard of levels of horror with the CGI, especially with the baby. I think Isle Elm, which, yes, they were one of the people that did the VFX for this movie, so you gotta shout them out. But I think the concept's cool. Like a baby and a dog fighting for the parents' attention. That's kind of a common trope. It's pretty cool. It's got a lot of Looney Tunes inspired shenanigans, and obviously it's super animated, and I don't think it works well in a live action setting as much, since if this film was maybe animated, it could have been a lot better. But yeah, I think certain sequences between the dog and the baby are pretty cool. They're pretty funny. Well, not funny, but I don't mind them. Like, they're decent. Like, I feel like when I was watching those parts of the movie, I was having actually some fun to it. What else? There's also some really cool distorted animated sequences that really showcases the powers of the mask and Loki here. The actor that they got to portray Loki, I also think he did a mostly pretty good job. I have no complaints about him. I know he's a good actor and he's been in a lot of stuff. And this portrayal of Loki, obviously, it's before the MCU and Tom Hiddleston and such, but I think it's pretty cool. He does a decent job. Even the, version of Odin that shows up in this movie is not too bad. And I like how they get more into the Norse mythology here and the origins and the Loki and the fact that he even shows up in this movie trying to get his mask back. That's an interesting plot. I think it's pretty cool that they kind of go deeper into the origins a little bit for the mask in this movie. Something that the first movie kind of never really touched up upon. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. And the whole dynamic revolving around family, sons, fathers reuniting, connecting with one another. How the baby, likes Ted at the end, and eventually Odin learns to respect and love his son Loki. That's a pretty cool and decent arc. Pretty generic, and it's been in tons of other movies, but it's still pretty heartwarming, and I think the movie, at least when it tries to be serious, does an okay job at it. And what else? I've already mentioned the cinematography. The music's okay. It's decent. And I guess, there's some other cool actors. I'm trying to remember Harold and Kumar, I think. That White Castle movie. One of those guys shows up in it. And I mean, Jamie Kennedy, obviously pretty infamous actor. And you can arguably make a kind of a statement here that this movie kind of ruined his career. I mean, he's no Jim Carrey, but I wouldn't say like he's the worst ever, I guess. He's okay, I guess, at the very best, but I don't think he was the right person for this job, by all means. Trying to find more things. I'm a bit struggling to find things about this movie that are really positive. I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, I did like the scene where at the end where Ted is fighting Loki and like he rips apart the road and it's so animated. That's pretty cool. I will say though, the real world ramifications of something like that and people dying should be huge, but obviously for whatever reason this movie is even more kid friendly than the first one somehow. They don't mention that, but I did like that sequence, and I think that's it. The road sequence and Ted's car. Ted kind of created this really strange looking, crazy hot rod. Like it looks just straight out like a Hotmobile. Not Hotmobile. What am I saying? Hot Wheels car. So that's cool, I guess. Now let's get into my cons because, goddamn, overall, man, I gotta be honest here. This is obviously a huge step down in quality from the first one, massively. I actually did not realize how unfunny this movie was going to be. And it's not like it's unfunny that it's so bad it's good and there's a strange quality to it. It's just not a funny movie, man. Like, it falls flat on its face. And I don't know, it's probably most likely the writing, but I also think it's the actor, Jamie Kennedy. No shame to him, and I know I've seen him in other stuff, and he can be funny, but man, he was not the right person to play the mask. Now, I do think the criticism, I already mentioned this earlier, but oh, it's not Jim Carrey, so it's automatically not good. I just think that's a pretty dumb criticism and argument for the whole situation, especially considering the fact that in the original comics, Stanley's only around for a few issues and then he gets killed. And the whole comic series is like a revolving door of people who wear the mask. And it still turns out to be a really great and interesting comic series. So I think it was the right approach for a sequel to have a new person to wear the mask, which was also kind of originally the plan with the canceled sequel with Tina being the one to wear it. Here, it's Jamie Kennedy's character, Ted, and I just have to be honest, it really just falls flat on its face. I think it's the humor. I don't think his choice of humor and maybe it's the writing, but it's just, like I already mentioned before, it's not that funny. And it's not like I wanted another Jim Carrey. It's not like I don't really want another Jim Carrey because Jim Carrey can only really do Jim Carrey and no one else can really do his type of performance and manic expressions and style and stuff. I just think the movie kind of tries to be like a Jim Carrey mask movie, especially with the fact that there's another scene where he wears the mask and then he shows up at a club and it's similar to the first movie. There's also another big dance number. But it just, like I said, it's so weird. Like the movie, I'm not trying to compare it to the original, but at the same time, there's sequences that are set up to be similar to the original. It's kind of really hard not to compare it. But when Ted becomes the mask, like the first, like it's so much night and day, to the first Mask movie, Jim Carrey. He almost becomes monotone, like Jamie Kennedy is the mask. Like becomes monotone and it's so strange. Like, it feels like, you're supposed to be this more wild, exaggerated version of yourself, but when he becomes the mask, it's just like, it's like he's held back. Like, I feel like when he was, like, just a crazy parent freaking out, he was expressing more of himself than he was the actual mask. And that's pretty bad. I don't really like his version of the mask. I think the makeup looks kind of strange. I don't mind the hairpiece, but, yeah. I think the choice of humor is not great. And there's just a lot of really unfunny scenes. Like, the whole scene where he shows up at the club. I mean, I liked that scene as a kid, to be fair. And I don't know why I liked it, but I really liked the song number. And to be fair, it's something that could have been done from the comics. And I guess, it's pretty creative, especially how it switches styles. But, gosh, man, it's just so unfunny. Like, it's just so unfunny. Like, it may be funny if you're drinking with your friends, but even then, I do not know. It's just not funny. The musical number is not that great, especially compared to the first movie. All the lines that Ted has as the mask are not that funny. And if you look at some of the deleted alternate scenes, bruh, it gets even worse. Like there's an alternate take for this scene where he shows up as the mask, and he says, just like Jim Carrey, smoking. And then he says something after that like, oh, smoking can cause you cancer or something ridiculous. I'm like, bro, that's insanely bad. Like, oh my gosh, it's so unfunny. Like, Jesus, they really dropped the ball in some of the humor here. And, it kind of continues when he basically fights Loki. I mean, he's not that funny. His manic expressions feel weirdly held back. I don't know. It's like his performance doesn't really match the exaggerated animated visuals that are happening on screen. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't think he was that great in this movie as a whole. But that's another big problem with this movie. The Uncanny Baby stuff. Now, the baby itself, the idea of it, I am kind of not really crazy about. The fact that Ted as the mask did it with his wife and this is how they created a baby out of it. What is that concept, bro? That's just really strange. Like, I just get a weird horror uncanny vibe from that. I don't know if it's just me, but it's just such a weird vibe and concept. And the baby, when he's doing all these crazy things with the dog, Otis. Now, I will say the design of Otis when he gets the mask on is actually really good. I really like it. It looks animated, but it looks really nicely well done. I may get some crap for saying this, but I kind of like the mask when it's on him slightly more than the, I guess, more creepy version that was on Milo in the first movie, but, that's only a slight compliment. But I like the dog and the baby scenes to an extent, But everything with the baby is super uncanny, creepy even. The CGI just was really just not there. And you have to remember, ILM worked on this movie, Industrial Light and Magic. Yes, they worked on this movie. They worked on Son of the Mask. And yeah, the CGI just clearly was not up to date for the baby scenes. There's some really creepy, uncanny stuff. And I think the problem is it's a live action movie and they're doing these exaggerated animated things, but instead of it being charming, how it would normally be in a maybe CGI animated film, it creates a really big problem because it's a live action movie and you get a super uncanny vibe to it. And just does not hold up that well. Like, I really just think some of the baby scenes are frankly terrifying. And the whole story, like I said, with the baby and the themes of family are interesting, but I already mentioned the main character is not really that likable, does not handle the situation there really that well, and there's just a lot of really unfunny scenes that kind of continue throughout this whole movie. There's a scene where, a baby, the crazy magical baby pees on Ted, and it gets, like, to the extreme points, literally a gushing, like a whole, like, what's it called, like a hose worth of pee spits out at him. Bro, that was not that funny. That was not that funny. It just, I don't know. Now, there are some pretty, like I said, not everything, not everything is horrible. There is one scene where, Ted is trying to make the baby say dada or daddy, and he just says in a serious, manly voice, mother. Now, that's one of those uncanny scenes, too. But I actually thought that one was kind of funny, admittedly. But, yeah, there's some just really bad comedy throughout this entire movie. The concept, too, is just kind of ridiculous, especially since, the whole point of this movie, Loki's trying to get his mask, which he lost, trying to make up to his father for being kind of a screw-up, and Ted, for whatever reason, doesn't give him the mask for most of the movie. And I don't know if it's, most likely because he doesn't know where it is, but I think at some point in the movie he does, and he just doesn't want to. I'm not sure what that is. I think that was just bad writing, but yeah, that was not a great part of the movie. The final battle between Loki and Ted felt very underwhelming. Like I said, I just think that the performances involved are not that great, especially when they match up to the exaggerated visuals of the first movie. Just not that great. Pretty disappointing overall. Just a really big lack of direction here and solid scene planning. It's just not that good. And, like I said, some of the visuals are kind of a mixed bag. I already mentioned this, but I'm going to keep mentioning it again. Just some really unfunny scenes, unnecessary scenes, too, added for fluff and just ridiculousness. I don't know. But, yeah. Just movie, like I said, the general theme of this video, and I'm kind of rambling, it's just an unfunny movie. It's a huge lack, and especially step down in quality from the first one. The humor falls extremely flat on its, really flat on its face. It's not funny. There's just some really awful sequences. I think every time Ted puts on the mask, it's just not great at all. Even the actor who plays Loki does a better job. There's some horrendous sequences they tend to do with him. Like I said, there's a scene where he, kind of plays different characters. He plays a little girl. At one point, he plays a baby. It just, I can't. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous and horrible and stupid. And there's just so many unfunny sequences. The story development is not really there. It doesn't feel like Ted learned anything besides the baby thing at the end. The wife, I'm not sure why she's still with him at the end of the movie, especially of how he treated her and how he went insane. And granted, it's natural why he went insane, but it's just how they did it. It's just horrible. And just a really weak story, really weak sequences, bizarre and uncanny parts of the movie, and just humor that falls extremely flat on its face, which I've already said. So to kind of quickly wrap this up, because I know I've been rambling, The Son of the Mask is a really disappointing sequel. I know a lot of people have already said it. There's been plenty of videos online. Just want to give you my opinion on it. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks. It's one of the worst sequels I've ever seen to a movie. It did not hold up as well as it did as a kid. I think this movie probably does appeal a bit more to children just because of how really goofy and animated it is. So I don't know, but I probably wouldn't even show this to my kid. Definitely not. It's just a not really good movie. Really falls flat on its face, disappointing compared to the first one, and honestly killed the whole Mask franchise, which is a huge shame. But yeah, that's my thoughts on The Son of the Mask from 2005. A horrible movie. Peace, y'all.